Hey everyone, in this video, we're gonna cover how to do a pre-op inspection on a skid steer. Check this out. Okay everyone, we're gonna start with a pre-op inspection, probably the most important part of operating equipment and also the most overlooked. You don't have to be an expert, don't have to be a diesel mechanic, do a good pre-op. A lot of it's just basic. You know, if it doesn't look right, you need to look into it further. So a couple of things, first and foremost for these videos, I wanna thank Precision Landscape in Hastings. They actually were using their John Deere 325 skid steer for these. One other thing, I'll be using a handheld camera. This is something new. We've had a lot of requests in our videos, people wanted to get close-ups. So hopefully this will help. But let us know what you think in the comments below, how this turns out. So with that said, our pre-ops, if you've seen my other videos, I try and be consistent. That's the only thing I can tell operators. Get in a routine. My way is not necessarily the right way. It's just the way I do it. Find your way and stick with it. So I separate my pre-ops into 3 pieces. One is my general walk around. That's just, I don't touch anything. It's just the biggest, when you look big picture, see if there's anything obvious that might look damaged, and we'll do that walk around. The number 2 is compartments. So that's where I start opening compartments, anything that I need to get in there to look at fluids. And then the third and final is in the operator seat. That's when I'm actually getting the piece of equipment. Again, those are the 3 things I do in all my pre-ops. It allows me to walk around twice, which I think is important. So with that said, let's go ahead. The first thing is gonna be the walk around. Now, if I start on the front of my equipment here, again, generally you're just looking for anything that sticks out, anything obvious, any obvious damage. I like to kind of like reading a book, left to right, top to bottom. You know, I start at the top, look if there's any damage on the window, the rollover protection, the cage, basically the whole system that protects the operator, and to see if I see any damage. I'm also coming up, and that's where I'm looking at to see if there's any damage to any of the cylinders or anything. So a lot of times when you look at, you know, stuff like this, if there's any damage to the cylinder there, this is where I'm making sure all the connections are complete. Like you can see right here, there is a big old rock right in there. Sometimes it's good like that, just to get rid of that while we can. So I'm looking at any of those, and I'm looking at any of the hoses here to make sure if there's any issues or anything like that, the connections. Coming around here as I'm looking, top to bottom. So again, all the hoses and connections, all the lines are in here. You never want to check a hydraulic line by hand, just because if you move that and it were to burst, it's under a lot of pressure. But I'm looking at all those connections to make sure there's no leaks, nothing obvious. This is also a good time to see if you're for greasing. You can see really easily how, if it looks greased or not, if it looks dry or not, something you might need to address. Then I'm coming down and I'm looking at the track system. So anything obvious on this, you know, you're looking at the rollers, making sure there's nothing obvious on any of them, any damage, anything stuck in there. The drive system, the sprocket there. If I see any uneven wear on the teeth there, that's something I would want to look into further. And just the overall tension of the track itself. You know, is it appropriate sag in there? You can tighten these by opening this compartment. You'd grease it, but it'd only be if there'd be a lot of sag in there. So I'm just seeing, you know, if anything looks damaged, if there's any leaks from the drive motor at all, that would be something you'd want to look at further. As I continue, coming around the back, and again, you've got more hoses here. All the connections, all the hydraulics. You can get a good picture down the side here of all the lines, and that's if I see anything leaking, anything bulging, looks like it's damaged. You're gonna wanna look at that. You're looking at all the connection points, where the bolts are, the pins, everything like that. And again, same thing with grease. I'm looking to make sure nothing looks overly dry or anything like that. Across the back, looking at the top. Again, seeing the cab is not damaged, nothing's wrong then with the exhaust system. We got our air intake, if there's any damage there. And again, looking down, I can see my fan, my radiator fan, if there's any damage to the fins or anything like that. You can kind of see through there, and I'm looking for any damage, anything like that. And then finally, just going down low. A lot of times, I tell people, just look underneath. You can see on the inside of the tracks, but also see if there's any leaks. Anything that might be obvious you might need to look at further. Continuing going around, again, I'm starting at the top, looking up, no damage to anything there. I can again grease there. I can look at my lines. Same thing down the side here. Checking the lines, no bulge, no damage, nothing like that. And continuing to look around, same thing with the tracks over here. Seeing if there's anything obvious to any of the rollers, anything that could be damage in there, anything that doesn't look like they're moving, they're locked up. You can see And then your teeth on your sprocket there, making sure there's no damage to that, no leaks to the drive motor. Tracks look the appropriate amount of sag in them, they don't look too loose. And then continuing around the front. Again, the bucket, I'm looking at the cutting edge, seeing if this is all worn down, that's where you're gonna wanna consider replacing that before it actually gets to the bucket itself. Like you can actually see on this one, this edge is a lot more worn than the other side. It's still fine, it was just something we were gonna wanna monitor on it. And then obviously if the bucket itself, if you see any damage, anything like that. And then I'm looking at the front. Any damage, anything like that on the front of the skid, see if there's any damage there. Going down, looking in here, again, this is where a lot of debris, you saw I pulled out a rock, but while I'm here, again, looking at all these lines, seeing if there's always gonna be rocks and things in there, but just make sure there's nothing larger that might be damaged. This is my quick attach here, making sure no damage, the cylinder, it looks good, everything like that. And that's my general walk around. So after the walk around, then I'm gonna go to compartments. It's really for the skid steer, it's pretty simple. It's just the engine compartment. So we'll walk around that side. While I'm walking, the one thing on the walk around, which this kind of goes between either compartments or walk around, is my hydraulic fluid level. The tank fill, if you see, is right there. I don't know if you can see, but it's right. You just wanna be in between the two marks and making sure that's appropriate there, so. Now, opening the hood on this thing. So this is the engine compartment. First thing, again, I always just try and look at anything obvious that sticks out. If I see any damage, anything like that, any wires, things like that. But then you've got your coolant check right here. Again, same thing. It's got a cold minimum, maximum right there. So right there is appropriate. We have got, this is the air filter. Normally you would take this out weekly and clean it. But almost all these air filters have a little discharge. I'm gonna see if you can get in there to see it. See how I pinch that? When I pinch that, that's kind of if anything larger, or if there's a lot of debris that's in there. A lot of times that's a good indicator too, if you need to pull that filter out. If you open this and you see a ton of dust, dirt, debris come out of that, that means that's all in there as well. So you're gonna wanna clean that out. There's our hydraulic oil. Again, we already checked the level on there, and then our engine oil. So I'm gonna check the engine oil. Generally for this, and just making sure it's right there on the right levels there, if that looked good. And then outside of that, again, you're looking at the intake system for the air intake, everything else in there. Seeing if there's just anything obvious you can see for damage, any of the belts, anything like that might be damaged, but everything looks, I don't see anything obvious that sticks out to me. Again, you don't need to be a mechanic, but as long as you can see there's no damage. We already kind of looked at the radiator fins, but then you can actually see, or the fan fins, the radiators behind it, if there's any damage to the coils or anything like that. And then we're good there. And then the final piece will be getting in the operator seat. Finally, getting in the operator seat here, 3 points of contact, getting in. And it's pretty simple for this. Pull this, you always have to have lock lever down. I just like to turn, again, for the John Deere, if I click this once, turns the system on. I'm looking for any error messages, anything up there that might indicate I cannot start it. And then I am just holding that to start it. So after that, I'm just seeing if there are any indicators. This is basically parking brakes open, on, my door is open, but I'm not getting any warning indicators. That's where you're getting indicators there. The other thing I'm doing is just listening to the engine. A lot of times I like to start it, have the door open, listen. You're gonna see if you hear something that might not sound right. And then the final thing is just checking my fluids, making sure I got enough fuel in the system to operate for the day, things like that. So that's how you complete a pre-op inspection on a skid steer. Okay, so that is a complete pre-op inspection for a skid steer. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know the handheld camera. I'm hoping that helped. It's a new format we haven't really done before. But any operators out there, please put comments below. Let us know things we might have missed, things you look for, things like that. So thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you in the next one.